Hi, I'm Jessica Chen. Last Christmas, my mother stood up at our family dinner, called me a disgrace to the Chen name, and told me never to come back. 3 months later, I walked into Meridian Technologies for my first board meeting as their new CEO, and found my mother sitting in the executive assistant's chair. The look on her face when Harold Williamson introduced me as the company's visionary new leader is something I'll never forget. But that's not even the real story. The real story is what happened in those 3 months in between. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was snowing in Seattle on Christmas Eve, which anyone from the Pacific Northwest will tell you is rare. Fat, damp flakes that clung to my wool coat as I stood on my parents' porch in Bellevue, staring at the ornate wreath hanging on their charter. The house looked like something from a holiday catalog. Icicle lights draped perfectly along the roofline, a glimpse of the 12-foot Douglas fir through the bay window, its white and gold ornaments catching the glow of a crackling fireplace. I hesitated before ringing the bell, clutching a bottle of merlot I couldn't really afford, and a folder of documents I'd been dreading to share. My startup had just secured initial funding. Not life-changing money, but enough to prove my algorithm wasn't just graduate school fantasy. It was real, workable, and potentially revolutionary for accessibility and AI interfaces. I'd spent 3 years building it in secret after my brother Tyler had borrowed my previous project for his senior thesis. This time, I had documentation, timestamps, blockchain verification, everything to prove this work was mine alone. My sister Amanda opened the door, champagne flute already in hand. She hugged me with one arm, the practiced half-embrace of someone. Checking a box. "You're late," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Mom's been asking when you'd show." The house smelled like pine, cinnamon, and my mother's signature beef tenderloin. Family photos lined the hallway. Amanda's wedding, Tyler's graduation from Stanford, my parents' anniversary cruise. I noticed my graduate school completion photo was no longer among them. "Where's Dad?" I asked, hanging my coat in the closet. "Study, conference call with the Tokyo office. Christmas waits for no man, not even St. Nicholas himself." She laughed at her own joke before disappearing back toward the kitchen. I found my mother arranging a charcuterie board, her sleeves pushed up, but her diamond tennis bracelet still, perfectly in place. Margaret Chen didn't believe in casual, even when elbow-deep in prosciutto and fig jam. "Jessica, finally, take this to the living room." She handed me the heavy wooden board without looking up. "Tyler and Stephanie are announcing their engagement tonight, so try not to bring up your project. Tonight isn't about work." My hands tightened around the board. "Actually, Mom, I have some news too. The seed funding came through. That's nice, honey." She was already turning away, reaching for the oven mitts. "But let's keep the focus where it belongs tonight, okay? Tyler's been working so hard at your father's firm, and Stephanie's family is flying in tomorrow. It's important." I bit my tongue and carried the appetizers to the living room where Tyler sat with his girlfriend. No, fiancé. Their heads bent together over a phone screen, probably admiring the princess-cut diamond that now adorned her left hand. He glanced up, nodded at me, then returned to whatever they were looking at. By the time we gathered around the dining table, my father had emerged from his study, still tapping at his phone. The table was set with the family china, candles flickering between elaborate centerpieces of holly and cranberries. Amanda's husband David was pouring wine, while my empty chair stood out like a sore thumb, the only place setting without a small gift box placed above it. "Sorry, Jess," Tyler said, following my gaze. "We did Secret Santa while we were waiting. You got Mom, by the way." My mother's tight smile made it clear no one had actually drawn my name. I was an afterthought. A courtesy invite because even Margaret Chen wouldn't exclude a child on Christmas. I placed the wine bottle on the table. "I brought this. It's from that vineyard you liked in Walla Walla." My father finally pocketed his phone. Let's eat before it gets cold. David, would you carve? Throughout dinner, conversation flowed around. Me like I was a boulder in a stream. Tyler's upcoming partnership track. Amanda's interior design business landing a contract with a luxury hotel chain. Stephanie's connections to the city's arts board. My father's expansion plans for Chen Global Consulting's European division. I waited for a lull, then cleared my throat. I actually have some news, too. My algorithm for adaptive interfaces just received seed funding from Westlake Ventures. They're backing the full development phase. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Then my father raised his eyebrows. Westlake? Harold Williamson's fund? That's unexpected. They see the potential, I said, reaching for the folder I'd set beside my chair. The accessibility applications alone could… Jessica, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I asked you not to make tonight about your little project. We're celebrating Tyler and Stephanie. It's not a little project. Mom, it's a company. My company. And Harold thinks it could transform how people with disabilities interact with AI systems. Tyler snorted into his wine glass. Harold Williamson is Mom's boss, Jess. She's been his executive assistant for 15 years. You didn't think maybe that influenced his decision? Heat rose to my face. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, Amanda chimed in. Why else would he fund your algorithm when he passed on Tyler's crypto payment platform last year? Mom obviously pulled strings. That's not true, I said, looking at my mother. Is it? My mother carefully placed her fork beside her plate, adjusting it until it sat at a perfect angle. I may have mentioned your situation to Harold. He feels strongly about supporting women in tech, especially those from employee families. The buy room tilted beneath me. My situation? You mean my company? The one based on technology I've been developing since grad school? Jessica, don't be dramatic. I simply helped open a door. That's what family does. I reached for the folder and pulled out the first page, the funding agreement with Westlake Ventures. Look at the terms. Look at the valuation. They didn't invest because I'm your daughter. They invested because my technology works. My father held up his hand. That's enough. Put that away. Tonight is about family, not business. This is about family, I insisted, my voice rising. This is about how none of you ever believe in what I do. How you've never taken my work seriously. Tyler rolled his eyes. Maybe because your work is always some idealistic project with no practical application. Some of us live in the real world, Jess. The real world? I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. You mean the world where Dad handed you a job right out of college? Where Mom calls her contacts whenever you need a door opened? That real world? Jessica! My mother's voice cracked across the table like a whip. That is quite enough. But it wasn't enough. 3 years of swallowing my words, of nodding and smiling while Tyler took credit for ideas we'd developed together in our shared apartment before he moved out. Of watching Amanda leverage our family name to build her business while I worked. Nights coding at a coffee shop to avoid asking for help. I pulled out another document. Do you want to know what else is in this folder? Evidence that Tyler stole my graduate research for his thesis. Email timestamps, server logs, comments in the code that he forgot to remove, my comments, with my initials. The table went silent. Tyler's face had gone pale beneath his carefully maintained tan. What is she talking about? My father asked, turning to him. Before Tyler could answer, my mother stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I will not have this at my Christmas table. Jessica, you've always been jealous of your brother's success. But this, accusing him of plagiarism, trying to ruin his reputation because you're bitter? I won't allow it. Mom, I have proof. I'm not making this up. Enough. Her palm slammed against the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. I've had enough of your accusations and your resentment. Tyler has worked hard to get where he is. He's about to make partner at your father's firm. He's getting married to a wonderful girl from a good family, and all you can do is try to tear him down because you're alone and struggling with your little coding projects. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at her. This woman who had once braided my hair before science fairs, who had framed my first computer science award in elementary school. When had I become someone she couldn't even see clearly? My little coding project just received $2 million in funding, I said quietly. And I didn't need Dad's name or your connections to get it. My mother's face hardened. If you really believe Harold Williamson would have given your proposal a second glance without knowing, you were my daughter, you're delusional. Margaret, my father warned, but she waved him off. No, Richard. It's time someone told her the truth. Jessica, you've been coasting on your intelligence without any practical sense your entire life. You refused to join the family business. You turned down connections we tried to make for you. And now you want to sit at our table and accuse your brother of stealing your precious ideas. Ideas that he, at least, knew how to implement successfully? The room was spinning. I looked at Tyler, who wouldn't meet my eyes, at Amanda, who was staring at her plate with sudden fascination, at my father, whose expression had gone carefully blank, the same face he wore in difficult client meetings. Tyler, I said softly, tell them you took my research. He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine for the first time that night. For a second, I saw something there. Regret, maybe. But then it was gone, replaced by the confident mask he always wore. I don't know what you're talking about, Jess. I wrote that thesis myself. Maybe we were working on similar concepts since we shared an apartment, but the implementation was all mine. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I'd known, of course. I'd known the moment I read his published thesis and found entire sections lifted from my notes. But I'd convinced myself that here, in front of our parents, he wouldn't be able to lie. I was wrong. You all think I'm crazy, I said, looking around the table. You think I'm making this up because I'm jealous. Jessica, my mother said, her voice cold. If you can't celebrate your brother's success without making accusations, perhaps you shouldn't be here at all. I stared at her, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. You know what? You're right. I stood up, carefully placing my napkin beside my untouched dessert. I shouldn't be here. I gathered my folder, tucking the papers back inside with shaking hands. Jessica, sit down, my father said. You're overreacting. Am I? Mom just suggested I leave. I'm simply taking her advice. If you walk out that door, my mother said, don't expect to be welcomed back until you apologize to your brother and his fiancée for ruining their announcement dinner. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had once been my fiercest advocate. I won't apologize for telling the truth, and I won't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. Then I think we're done here, she said. Richard, please show Jessica out. My father hesitated, looking between my mother and me. For a moment, I thought he might say something, might finally stand up for me against the golden children. But then he stood and gestured toward the hallway. I'll get your coat. I followed him to the front closet, numb. The Christmas tree lights blurred through unexpected tears as he handed me my wool coat, heavy with melted snow. Dad, I whispered. You know I'm telling the truth about Tyler. He wouldn't look at me. It's Christmas, Jessica. Was tonight really the time to bring all this up? When is the time? When Tyler becomes partner based on stolen ideas? When he builds his entire career on taking credit for other people's work? My father sighed, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. Your brother understands how the world works. He plays the game. You've always insisted on making things harder for yourself. By having integrity? By wanting credit for my own work? He opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, carrying fresh snowflakes that melted against the warm entryway tile. Go home, Jessica. Cool off. Call your mother in a few days when you're thinking more clearly. I am thinking clearly. Maybe for the first time. I stepped out onto the porch, turning to look at him one last time. Merry Christmas, Dad. He closed the door without replying. I stood there for a moment, snowflakes catching in my hair, looking at the perfect holiday scene through the bay window. My family had resumed dinner as if I'd never been there. Tyler was raising a glass, probably toasting his engagement. My mother was smiling, the perfect hostess once again. Even from outside, I could hear faint laughter. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Eric, my best friend since college and the only person who'd believed in my algorithm from the beginning. How's it going? Need an extraction? I typed back with numb fingers. Too late, already extracted myself. Forever, apparently. His response came immediately. I'm at Blue Bottle on Pine. Come drink entirely too much caffeine and tell me everything. I glanced back at the warm house one more time, then walked to my car, brushing snow from the windshield with my bare hand. The cold bit into my skin, but I barely felt it. Something else had gone numb inside me, the part that had always hoped, despite everything, that my family might eventually see me. As I drove away from the perfect Christmas scene in my parents' window, I didn't know that in 3 months I'd be sitting across from Harold Williamson as he offered me not just funding, but leadership of Meridian Technologies. I didn't know my algorithm would catch the attention of Microsoft's accessibility team, or that Google would try to poach me with an 8-figure offer. And I certainly didn't know that my mother would end up working for me, her face pale with shock as Harold introduced me as the new CEO on a rainy Seattle morning. I didn't know any of that as I drove through the snowy streets toward the one person who had always believed in me. All I knew was that I was alone on Christmas, with nothing but a folder full of evidence no one wanted to see, and a dream no one in my family thought was worth believing in. Blue Bottle Coffee on Pine Street was a haven of warmth amid the swirling snow. Floor-to-ceiling windows had fogged over from the heat inside, turning the street view into a soft focus painting of headlights and holiday decorations. I pushed through the door, the familiar scent of espresso and cardamom wrapping around me like a blanket. Eric sat in our usual corner spot, 2 ceramic mugs and a plate of gingerbread cookies on the reclaimed wood table in front of him. His dark curls were damp from the snow, his Seattle University sweatshirt zipped up against the chill. One look at my face, and he was on his feet. That bad? He asked, pulling me into a hug that smelled like coffee and the sandalwood cologne he'd worn since sophomore year of college. I couldn't speak yet. The lump in my throat felt like a stone, and the warmth of the coffee shop after the freezing drive had brought feeling back to my hands in painful tingles. Eric guided me to the chair across from his, sliding a mug toward me. Oat milk latte? With cardamom. And before you ask, yes, I already paid your tab for the next 2 weeks. Consider it your Christmas present. The laugh that escaped me was more like a sob. I was only gone 2 hours. How did you know? Eric shrugged, breaking a cookie in half and offering me the larger piece. Because I've known you since you were 19 and wearing that horrible coding camp t-shirt in advanced algorithms. And because this is the 3rd Christmas in a row that ended with you leaving early. I wrapped my frozen hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into my skin. This one was different. I don't think I'm going back. His eyebrows rose, but he didn't look surprised. Not really. Want to tell me what happened? I did. All of it. The carefully arranged dinner table missing my secret Santa gift. Tyler's engagement announcement that overshadowed everything. My mother's dismissal of my funding news. The confrontation about the stolen research. My mother's cold declaration that I shouldn't come back without an apology. The final, crushing betrayal of my father closing the door on me in the snow. Eric listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finally fell silent, he pushed. the plate of cookies closer to me. Eat something. Sugar helps with shock. I'm not in shock, I said, even as I realized my hands were still trembling. Yes, you are, and it's completely warranted. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Jess, what they did to you wasn't just unfair. It was cruel, and it's not the first time. I broke off a piece of gingerbread, not because I was hungry, but to have something to do with my hands. Tyler has always been their golden child, the son who would take over the family business, and Amanda married into exactly the kind of family they always wanted to be connected with. I'm just the inconvenient middle child who won't play by the rules. You're the brilliant child who refuses to let them dim your light, Eric corrected. And they can't stand it because it reminds them of their own compromises. The coffee shop was nearly empty this late on Christmas Eve. A barista wiped down counters to the soft soundtrack of indie holiday covers. Outside, the snow had begun to fall more heavily, casting a hush over the city. I have to show you something, I said, pulling the folder from my bag. I spread the documents across the table. The funding agreement with Westlake Ventures, the email chains proving Tyler had accessed my research files, the side-by-side comparison of my original code with chunks that appeared verbatim in his thesis. Eric examined each page carefully, his background in computer science making him one of the few people who could fully understand what he was seeing. When he looked up, his expression was grim. This is blatant theft. You have everything you need to file an academic integrity complaint with Stanford. And destroy his career? The words felt hollow even as I said them. His career that he built by stealing your work, Eric pointed out. Jess, why are you still protecting him? I stared down into my half-empty mug. I'm not protecting him, I don't know. I guess I always thought if I had enough proof they would have to believe me. That my parents would finally see the truth. But they don't want to see it, Eric said gently. And that's not your fault. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that truth settling between us. I'd spent years trying to earn my family's respect, their recognition. Tonight had finally shown me how futile that was. So what now? Eric asked, gathering the documents back into a neat pile. I don't know. The funding from Westlake comes through officially next week. I need to find office space, start building a team. I attempted a smile. Become a real CEO, I guess. You've been a real CEO since you incorporated adaptive interface solutions last year. The only difference now is that other people are finally catching up to what I've always known. He hesitated, then added, There's space in my building. The tech incubator on the 3rd floor. 2 corner offices just opened up. In South Lake Union? I can't afford that neighborhood. With $2 million in funding, you can now. He pulled out his phone. My friend Maya manages the space. I can text her right now. Before I could reply, my own phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it reluctantly, half expecting more fallout from the dinner disaster. Instead, I found a message that made my heart skip. Jessica Chen, Harold Williamson here. Exceptional presentation last week. Been thinking about your adaptive interface. It's not just an investment opportunity. It's the missing piece for Meridian's accessibility initiative. Coffee tomorrow. Unusual timing, I know, but I'm flying to Tokyo on the 26th. The Fairmont, 10 a.m. I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times to make sure I understood. What is it? Eric asked, frowning at my expression. Harold Williamson wants to meet. Tomorrow. Christmas Day. Eric whistled low. The Harold Williamson? Meridian Technologies CEO wants to meet on Christmas? Apparently. I looked up. Confusion. Battling with a spark of hope. He says my interface is the missing piece for their accessibility initiative. Holy shit, Jess! Eric's eyes were wide. Meridian has been trying to crack adaptive interface technology for years. Their last attempt crashed and burned so badly, they had to scrap the whole project. I know, I studied the failure as a cautionary case in my thesis. I glanced back at the text message. But why meet on Christmas Day? And how did he get my number? Who cares? This is huge. Eric was practically bouncing in his seat. Then his expression suddenly sobered. Wait, your mom works for him, right? As his executive assistant? The spark of excitement dimmed. You think this is some kind of pity meeting? Some favor to my mother after our fight? No, that timing doesn't make sense. Your mom couldn't have contacted him already. Not on Christmas Eve with everything that just happened. Eric frowned, thinking. And why would she? She all but told you your project wasn't worth discussing at dinner. Then why? Maybe because you actually have groundbreaking technology and he's smart enough to recognize it? Eric suggested, raising an eyebrow. Just a wild theory. A laugh escaped me, more genuine this time. You're biased. I'm honest, and I've watched you code circles around everyone in Seattle's tech scene for years while taking jobs beneath your skill level because no one would give you a chance. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Maybe someone finally is. The barista approached to let us know they were closing in 15 minutes. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the city into a glittering, silent wonderland that bore little resemblance to the Seattle I knew. The kind of night that felt suspended between realities. I don't have anywhere to go, I realized suddenly. I left my apartment last month when the lease ended. All my stuff is in storage until the funding came through. It had been a calculated risk, saving the rent money to stretch my dwindling savings until the Westlake investment was finalized. I'd been couch surfing with friends and planning to crash at my parents' house through the holidays. You're staying with me, Eric said immediately. The sofa pullout is all yours. Has been ever since you helped me debug that nightmare project for Microsoft last year. I knew I should protest, should insist I could find a hotel. But the truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of being alone tonight. Not after everything. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Let's go home. Eric's apartment in Capitol Hill was a cozy one-bedroom in an old converted warehouse, all exposed brick and pipes, with windows that stretched nearly from floor to ceiling. He'd decorated it sparsely but thoughtfully, bookshelves overflowing with computer science texts and sci-fi novels, a weathered leather couch he'd rescued from a thrift store, and exactly one plant, a stubborn pothos that somehow thrived, despite his erratic watering schedule. He insisted I take a hot shower while he made up the pull-out couch with fresh sheets and his spare duvet. By the time I emerged in borrowed sweats and a faded hackathon t-shirt, the apartment smelled like chamomile tea and the cinnamon rolls he'd apparently been hiding in his freezer. Midnight snack, he announced, placing a plate on the coffee table. Christmas tradition. We ate in comfortable silence, watching the snow continue to fall outside the windows. The city lights glowed softly through the white haze, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, announcing midnight. And the official arrival of Christmas. I should be feeling worse, I said suddenly. I just got disowned by my entire family, and yet sitting here, I almost feel relieved. Eric considered this, licking a spot of frosting from his thumb. Maybe because you're finally free of expectations that were crushing you. Or maybe I'm in denial and the breakdown is coming later, I offered with a weak smile. Also possible, in which case I have ice cream in the freezer and a complete collection of terrible holiday movies ready to stream. He nudged my shoulder, gently. Whatever happens, you're not alone, Jess. The simple statement brought tears to my eyes more effectively than all the cruelty of the evening. I blinked them away quickly, focusing on my tea. I should prepare for tomorrow, I said. If Harold Williamson really wants to discuss integrating my interface with Meridian systems, I need to review their architecture. It's after midnight, and you just went through emotional warfare. Sleep first, prep in the morning. Eric stood, collecting our empty plates. I set an alarm for 8. That gives you plenty of time before the meeting. I knew he was right, but the thought of closing, my eyes seemed impossible. My mind was racing between the disaster at dinner and the unexpected opportunity that had emerged from the ruins of my family relationships. I don't think I can sleep, I admitted. Try, Eric insisted. I'll be right in there if you need anything. He pointed to his bedroom door, then hesitated. You know they're wrong about you, right? Your family. They're completely, utterly wrong. The simple conviction in his voice steadied something inside me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He smiled, squeezed my shoulder once, and disappeared into his room, leaving me alone with the glow of the city through the windows and the soft sound of snow melting against the glass. Despite my certainty that sleep would elude me, exhaustion won out. I woke to pale winter sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why my chest felt so heavy. Then it all came rushing back. The disastrous dinner, my mother's cold dismissal, the door closing on me in the snow. And the text from Harold Williamson. That might change everything. I sat up, pushing the duvet aside. Eric stood at the kitchen counter, already dressed in jeans and a green sweater, his curls still damp from a shower. "Merry Christmas," he said, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter to me. "How are you feeling?" Like I got hit by a train. I ran a hand through my tangled hair. But also, okay? Is that weird? Not at all. He checked his watch. "You have 2 hours before your meeting with Williamson. There's a clean towel in the bathroom, and I put your clothes in the dryer to freshen them up." I took a grateful sip of coffee, perfectly prepared with a splash of oat milk. "Have I told you lately that you're the best person I know?" "Not nearly. Often enough." He grinned, then turned more serious. "Your phone's been blowing up, by the way. I didn't look, but it kept buzzing all morning." Sure enough, when I checked my phone, I found 17 missed calls and texts. 3 from my father, terse messages asking where I was staying. 5 from Amanda, oscillating between annoyed, "Way to ruin Christmas, Jess," and concerned, "Dad. Says you're not answering, just let us know you're safe." The rest were from Tyler, increasingly frantic. "You can't seriously be considering exposing this." "It was years ago, Jess. Let it go. I'll lose my partnership track if this gets out. Please call me. We can work something out." The last one sent a chill through me. "Mom's furious. She's talking about calling Harold Williamson to rescind the funding offer." I showed the message to Eric, my hand trembling slightly. "She can't do that," he said firmly. "The agreement is between Westlake Ventures and your company. Your mother has no legal standing to interfere." "But she could poison the well with Williamson. She's been his right hand for 15 years. "Then you'd better show up to that meeting and make such a compelling case that it won't matter what she says." Eric handed me a plate with toast and scrambled eggs. "Eat, shower, then we'll strategize." By the time I was showered and dressed in yesterday's clothes, thankfully a simple black turtleneck and gray trousers that didn't scream, "I slept on a pull-out couch after being disowned," Eric had set up his laptop on the kitchen counter with Meridian Technologies system architecture pulled up on one screen and my adaptive interface documentation on the other. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "Williamson isn't just meeting with you about an investment or even a partnership. He specifically mentioned Meridian's accessibility initiative, the one they've sunk millions into with minimal results." I nodded, scanning the documentation. Their last attempt relied on predictive algorithms that couldn't account for variability in user needs. It was too rigid. Exactly. And your interface is the opposite. It learns and adapts to individual users in real time. Eric looked up, eyes bright with the intensity he got when solving a particularly complex problem. "Jess, what if he's not just interested in your technology? What if he wants you?" "What do you mean?" "Meridian needs someone who understands adaptive interfaces at a fundamental level. Someone who can build from the ground up, rather than trying to retrofit their existing systems. He pointed to the screen where my company profile was displayed. You're not just a coder. You're the CEO of a company built around exactly the technology they need. A flutter of something like hope sparked in my chest, but I tamped it down, quickly. They wouldn't hand over their flagship accessibility initiative to someone like me. I'm 28 with no corporate leadership experience. You have a PhD in computer science from the University of Washington, 3 years of development, experience, and the only working prototype of the exact technology they need. Eric shook his head. Stop underestimating yourself. That's your family's job, not yours. The words stung because they were true. I'd internalized so much of their dismissal that I'd learned to diminish my own accomplishments before anyone else could. So what's my approach? I asked, pushing past the discomfort. If you're right, and this is more than just an investment discussion, lead with the technology, but be ready to talk vision and implementation. Show him you're not just a brilliant engineer, but someone who understands how this fits into Meridian's larger goals. Eric closed the laptop. And remember, he contacted you on Christmas Day. That means he's serious. I checked the time. 9:15. I should go. The Fairmont is downtown, and with the snow, traffic might be slow. Eric grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. I'll drive you. No arguments. It's Christmas, and the buses are running on holiday schedule. We drove through a Seattle transformed by snow and emptied by the holiday. The usual traffic had vanished, leaving the streets eerily quiet. Downtown sparkled with Christmas decorations, though most storefronts were dark and closed. The Fairmont Hotel stood like a beacon, its historic facade adorned with elegant evergreen garlands and white lights. Eric pulled up to the entrance. Want me to wait? No, this could take a while. I'll text you when I'm done. I hesitated, then leaned over to hug him fiercely. Thank you for everything. Go change your life, he said with a grin. Then we'll celebrate properly. The Fairmont's lobby was a study in understated luxury, soaring ceilings, marble floors, and tasteful holiday decorations that whispered old money rather than shouting festivity. A massive Christmas tree stood in the center, adorned with gold and burgundy ornaments. I approached the concierge, suddenly aware of my day-old clothes and the fact that I hadn't brought so much as a notebook with me. I'm here to meet Harold Williamson? The woman smiled. Ms. Chen? Mr. Williamson is expecting you in the Cascade Room. Right this way. She led me through the lobby to a small meeting room overlooking Elliott Bay. The space was intimate but formal, a polished table with 6 chairs, a sideboard with coffee service, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing a view of the water and snow-covered Olympic mountains beyond. Harold Williamson stood as I entered. He was taller than he appeared in press photos, his silver hair immaculately styled, wearing a casual but clearly expensive charcoal sweater rather than his usual business attire. At 63, he had the lean physique of someone who made time for the gym despite running a technology empire. Jessica Chen, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for making time on Christmas Day. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct and assessing. This was a man who had built Meridian Technologies from a small software company into a global competitor that went toe-to-toe with Microsoft and Google. Thank you for the invitation, I replied, pleased that my voice remained steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. It's not every day I get a text from the CEO of Meridian. He smiled slightly. No small talk then. I appreciate directness. He gestured to the table where a laptop sat open. I've been reviewing your adaptive interface technology since our team first flagged it 3 weeks ago. I want to show you something. I took the seat beside him, curious despite my nerves. On the screen was a familiar interface, my own, but integrated into what was clearly Meridian's accessibility platform. Your team mocked this up? I asked, studying the implementation. Over the past week, yes, a proof of concept. He clicked. Through several screens, showing how my adaptive learning algorithms had been theoretically integrated with Meridian's existing systems. We've been trying to solve this problem for 3 years. Our last head of accessibility promised results, but ultimately delivered a system so rigid it was unusable for anyone with variable needs. I nodded, recalling the case study. Adaptive technology can't be one size fits all. The whole point is personalization. Exactly. He turned to face me fully. Which brings me to why I asked you here today. Meridian is preparing to launch a new division focused exclusively on accessibility technologies. We've secured partnerships with healthcare providers, disability advocacy organizations, and educational institutions. What we don't have is the core technology to make it work, or the right person to lead it. My breath caught. Eric had been right. And you think that person is me? I know it is. Williamson closed the laptop. Your algorithm is the most elegant solution I've seen to a problem that has stumped our best engineers. But more importantly, your approach demonstrates something rare. You understand that technology should adapt to humans, not the other way around. He pushed a folder across the table. Unlike the one I'd brought to my parents' house last night, this one was embossed with Meridian's logo. This is a formal offer. We want to acquire adaptive interface solutions and install you as CEO of Meridian. Accessibility, full creative control, a seat on the executive board, and resources beyond what Westlake Ventures could provide. I opened the folder with unsteady hands. The numbers inside made me blink in disbelief. This is substantial. It's fair, he corrected. We're not just buying technology. We're investing in vision and leadership. Mr. Williamson? Harold, please. Harold, I amended. Why me? There are other accessibility startups with more established track records, and I'm sure you're aware I have limited management experience. He considered me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. 20 years ago, I was where you are now, a gifted engineer with an idea everyone else had missed. The difference is, I had mentors who believed in me. Doors opened because people with power recognized potential and weren't threatened by it. He leaned forward slightly. From what I can tell, you've had to fight for every opportunity. Yet, you've still built something remarkable. The understanding in his eyes was almost too much to bear after last night's rejection. There's something else you should know, I said, gathering my courage. My mother is Margaret Chen. She's been your executive assistant for 15 years. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. I'm aware of the relationship. Margaret is an excellent assistant, organized and discreet. But I assure you, that connection played no role in this offer. She might tell you otherwise, I said carefully. We had a disagreement last night about my work, among other things. Harold's expression remained neutral. Family complications are unfortunately common in business, but I make decisions based on merit, not office politics. He tapped the folder. Take the weekend to review the offer. We can discuss any questions on Monday. I should have thanked him and left to consider the proposal carefully. That would have been the professional response. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Did you know my brother stole my research for his thesis?" The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. This wasn't the place to air family grievances. But Harold didn't seem offended by the non sequitur. I didn't know the specifics, but I suspected something of the sort. At my surprised look, he explained, "Your brother interviewed with our innovation team last year. Impressive credentials on paper, but when pressed about the technical details of his thesis, he couldn't explain fundamental concepts. It was telling." A strange laugh escaped me. "So you knew. While my own parents refused to believe me, you, a stranger, could see it immediately." Sometimes those closest to us are the least able to see clearly. Harold's voice had softened slightly. My daughter and I didn't speak for nearly a decade because I couldn't accept her choice to become an artist rather than join the family business. It took my heart attack 3 years ago for both of us to recognize what we were losing. The personal revelation surprised me. Harold Williamson was notoriously private, his family life absent from the press coverage that followed his business success. "I'm sorry," I said. "That must have been difficult." "It was entirely my fault," he admitted. "I was so convinced I knew what was best that I couldn't see I was crushing her spirit." He stood, indicating our meeting was concluding. "Take the time you need with the offer, Jessica. This decision will change your life, one way or another. It should be made with clarity, not impulse." I rose as well, clutching the folder. "Thank you for this opportunity. Regardless of what I decide, I'm honored you saw potential in my work." "I see potential in you," he corrected. "The technology is impressive, but it's the mind behind it that Meridian needs." As we walked toward the door, he added, "One more thing. The Accessibility Division launch is scheduled for March 15th. If you accept, you'd need to be ready to hit the ground running. The executive team meets every Monday morning at 9 a.m., including Margaret Chen, who handles administrative support for all C-level meetings." The implication was clear. If I took this position, I would be working in close proximity to my mother, potentially as her superior. "Is that a problem?" I asked directly. Harold's expression remained neutral, but I caught a glint of something like approval in his eyes. "That would depend entirely on how you both choose to handle it. Professional boundaries are essential in any organization, particularly in situations with complicated histories." I nodded, understanding what wasn't being said. "I appreciate the candor." "Merry Christmas, Jessica." He extended his hand once more. "I look forward to your decision." I left the Fairmont in a daze, the weight of the folder in my hands both thrilling and terrifying. The snow had stopped, leaving the city blanketed in pristine white that was already turning to slush where people had begun to venture out. I found a bench overlooking the harbor and sat, needing a moment to process everything that had happened. In the span of less than 24 hours, I'd lost my family and been offered the opportunity of a lifetime. The contrast was so stark, it felt almost fictional. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. "How did it go? Need a ride?" I started to type a response, then stopped as another message came through, from my mother. "I've just spoken with Harold. This ridiculous vendetta against your brother has gone far enough. Family loyalty should mean something to you. Call me immediately." The familiar surge of guilt and anger rose in my chest. Even now, she was trying to control the narrative, to make me feel small and ungrateful. But something had shifted inside me since last night. The broken piece that had always ached for her approval had begun to heal over, forming a protective scar. I put the phone away without responding and opened Harold's folder again, reviewing the details of the offer with clearer eyes. It wasn't just generous. It was everything I'd been working toward. Creative control, resources, a platform to make technology that could genuinely improve lives. And yes, it would mean seeing my mother regularly in a context where our roles were reversed. The thought should have made me anxious, but instead, I felt a strange calm certainty. I picked up my phone and texted Eric. It went better than I could have imagined. "I'll tell you everything soon. Can you meet me at the storage unit? I think it's time I unpacked." The storage unit smelled of cardboard and dust, the overhead fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across stacked boxes labeled in my precise handwriting. Eric stood beside me, hands on his hips, surveying the Tetris puzzle of my life compressed into a 10x15 space. "I still can't believe you color-coded your packing system," he said, pointing to the blue, green, and red dots on each box, says the man who alphabetizes his spice rack. I pulled a small notebook from my pocket, my inventory list with each box numbered and its contents meticulously cataloged. We just need the essentials for now. The rest can wait until I find a permanent place. Eric grinned, already reaching for a box marked Dev Equipment, Priority. So you're taking the job? I haven't decided yet. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The opportunity Williamson had offered wasn't just a job, it was validation, purpose, and the chance to build something meaningful. Of course I was. Taking it. We loaded Eric's car with my computer equipment, enough clothes for a week, and a box simply labeled Grandma's Things. Photos, letters, and the vintage Belova watch she'd left me before she died. The only family heirloom I'd managed to hold on to. You can stay with me until you close on a place, Eric offered as we drove back toward Capitol Hill, the boxes secure in his trunk. No rush. You've already done too much. It's not a burden when it's for someone who would do the same for me. He glanced over, his expression turning serious. Have you thought about what happens when you see your mother at Meridian? Because that's going to be intense. The question hit a nerve I'd been trying to ignore. Honestly, I've been trying not to think about it. Professional boundaries, like Harold said. Right, because your mother is so great with boundaries. I sighed, watching Seattle's skyline emerge through the winter haze. I can't let her control this decision, too. If I turn down an incredible opportunity because I'm afraid of confronting her, she wins. Again. Fair enough. Just prepare yourself. From everything you've told me, she's not going to take this shift in dynamics well. He was right, of course. Margaret Chen had built her identity around being the indispensable right hand to one of Seattle's most powerful tech executives. My sudden elevation would be a threat to that carefully constructed position, and to the narrative she'd created about her children. Back at Eric's apartment, I set up my development environment on his dining table while he made pasta for a late Christmas lunch. The familiar rhythm of configuring my workspace calmed me, giving my hands something to do while my mind processed the seismic shifts of the past 24 hours. My phone had been mercifully quiet since my mother's last text. Either she believed I would eventually capitulate as I always had before, or she was regrouping for a more strategic attack. Neither option was comforting. You know what's weird? I said, looking up from my monitors. I keep waiting to feel devastated about last night, but mostly I feel relieved. Like I've been carrying this massive weight for years, and suddenly, it's gone. Eric sprinkled Parmesan over 2 plates of fettuccine. Because now you can stop trying to fit into their narrow definition of success. You don't have to translate everything you do into terms they can understand or approve of. Maybe. I accepted the plate he handed me. Or maybe I'm still in shock. Also possible. But consider this. You just got offered a C-level position at one of the biggest tech companies in Seattle. That kind of validates your life choices, doesn't it? I laughed, the sound surprising even me. When you put it that way. We spent the rest of Christmas Day in a strange, peaceful bubble. Eric streamed terrible holiday movies while I reviewed Meridian's offer in detail, making notes and researching their corporate structure. By evening, I had drafted an acceptance email, though I didn't send it. Something held me back, not doubt about the opportunity, but a nagging feeling that I needed to resolve the family situation first, one way or another. You're overthinking it, Eric said when I confessed this hesitation. Send the email. Deal with your family separately. I can't compartmentalize like that. Not with this. I closed my laptop. I need to talk to my father, at least. He might be under my mother's influence, but he's always been more reasonable. And if he takes her side again? Then I'll know exactly where I stand. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over my father's contact information. But I have to try. One last time. Eric nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll give you some privacy. Once he had retreated to his bedroom, I pressed call, my heart pounding as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when my father's voice came through, cautious and subdued. Jessica? Hi, Dad. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. A pause, then. Are you all right? We've been worried? The we stung, a reminder that in his mind they were still a united front. I'm fine. I'm staying with Eric. Good, that's good. He cleared his throat. Your mother is quite upset, Jessica. Of course, that was his first concern. I imagine she is. This situation with your brother, these accusations, they're causing a lot of pain in the family. I closed my eyes, gathering my patience. They're not accusations, Dad. They're facts. Tyler took my research. I have proof. Research from years ago. What purpose does it serve to bring this up now, when he's building his career, when he's about to start a family? The purpose is truth, I said simply. The purpose is acknowledging what actually happened instead of the story you've all decided to believe. My father sighed, the sound heavy with fatigue. Jessica, family is about more than being right. Sometimes it's about letting things go for the greater good. Whose greater good, Dad? Not mine. Not the truth. You've always been so rigid about these things, so unwilling to bend. I almost laughed at the irony. You mean I've been unwilling? To let Tyler take credit for my work? Unwilling to smile and pretend it's fine when it's not? You're right. I am rigid about that. Your mother says you've been speaking with Harold Williamson. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. Yes, about my adaptive interface technology. She's concerned you might try to damage her professional reputation out of spite. This time I did laugh, the sound sharp and humorless. Spite? Is that what she thinks this is about? You have to understand, Jessica. Your mother has worked for Harold for 15 years. Her position there is very important to her. I know that, Dad. Believe me, I know exactly how important her job is to her. I took a deep breath. But this isn't about her. Harold Williamson is interested in my technology and my company. That has nothing to do with my mother. So you haven't discussed your family disagreements with him? The careful phrasing told me everything I needed to know about where his priorities lay. No, Dad. Despite what you and Mom might think, I don't actually spend all my time plotting revenge against my family. I have my own life, my own work, my own priorities. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother thinks you should decline whatever offer Meridian has made, that it would be inappropriate given the circumstances. My grip tightened on the phone. Let me get this straight. Mom thinks I should turn down the biggest opportunity of my career because it might make her uncomfortable? She thinks you might not be ready for that level of responsibility. That perhaps you should gain more experience first. The condescension was so familiar it almost didn't hurt anymore. Almost. Well, fortunately for everyone, my career decisions aren't subject to family approval. Jessica, please, can't we discuss this reasonably? Perhaps if you came by tomorrow, we could all talk. All talk? You mean you, Mom, Tyler, and Amanda can tell me why I'm wrong, why I'm overreacting, why I should just let Tyler keep taking credit for my work? No, thank you. Your brother is very sorry about what happened. He was young, under pressure. Stop. My voice was sharper than I intended. Just stop, Dad. Tyler isn't sorry he stole my work. He's sorry he might face consequences for it. My father fell silent again, and I could picture him at his desk in the study, pinching the bridge of his nose the way he did when negotiations weren't going his way. What do you want, Jessica? An apology? Fine. I'm sure Tyler will apologize, if that's what it takes to mend this rift. I don't want an empty apology. I want acknowledgement of what actually happened. I want my family to stop gaslighting me about my own experiences. I want to be treated with the same respect you give Tyler and Amanda. We've always supported you. No, you haven't. The simple truth of it burned in my throat. You've tolerated me. You've helped when it was convenient or when it aligned with your vision for my life, but you've never truly supported me for who I am. Another heavy sigh. I think you're being unfair. I think I'm finally being honest, and it's uncomfortable, because it doesn't fit the story you've all agreed to tell about our family. So what now? He asked, an edge of resignation in his voice. You cut us off? Throw away your family over old grievances? I didn't cut anyone off, Dad. Mom told me not to come back unless I apologized to Tyler. Remember? For telling the truth. She was upset. We all were. It was Christmas Eve, for God's sake. And that makes it okay? The timing somehow justifies disowning your daughter? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. What about Meridian? He finally asked. Have you made a decision? I'm accepting the position, I said, the words cementing my resolve as I spoke them. I'm going to be CEO of their new accessibility division. And your mother? Have you thought about how this will affect her? I've thought about it, but this is my career, my future. I can't turn it down because it might make Mom uncomfortable to see me succeed. My father was quiet for so long I thought the call might have dropped. Then, softly, she'll see it as a betrayal. Everything I do that doesn't fit her plan is a betrayal in her eyes, Dad. I can't live my life around that anymore. I see. 2 simple words that carried the weight of decades of disappointment. Well then, I suppose congratulations are in order. Thank you. The formality between us was painful, like speaking to a stranger wearing my father's face. I should go. Your mother will be wondering who I'm talking to. Of course. Heaven forbid he have a conversation with his daughter without reporting back. Goodbye, Dad. Jessica, he said, just before I could end the call. Be careful. Your mother, she doesn't handle perceived threats well, especially to her professional standing. A warning, though whether it was born of concern for me or for her was unclear. I know, Dad. Believe me, I know. The call ended, leaving me staring at the blank screen of my phone. The conversation had confirmed what I already suspected. There would be no real reconciliation, no acknowledgement of the truth, no change in the family dynamics that had pushed me to the margins for years. And yet, I felt strangely calm. The last thread of hope had been severed, but with it, the last tentacle of obligation. I was truly on my own now, for better or worse. Eric emerged from his room, eyebrows raised in silent question. It went about, as expected, I said. Dad thinks I should decline the Meridian position to avoid upsetting Mom. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. And I'm accepting it first thing tomorrow morning. I picked up my laptop, opening a new email to Harold Williamson. No more waiting, no more second guessing. Eric grinned. That's my girl. The next morning, I sent the acceptance email before I could reconsider. Harold's response came within the hour. A brief welcome to Meridian Technologies, along with details for an orientation meeting on December 27th, and instructions to contact HR about expediting my onboarding process. It was happening. In 2 days, I would walk into Meridian's headquarters not as a visitor or a potential investment, but as the CEO of a new division. The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. We need to celebrate, Eric declared, when I showed him the email. Proper celebration, not just takeout on my couch. Eric, it's the day after Christmas. Everything's closed. Not the nest. He was already grabbing his jacket. The tech crowd never takes holidays off. Come on, CEO Chen. Your public awaits. The Nest was a tech industry haunt in South Lake Union, a sleek bar and restaurant that catered to the Amazon and startup crowds. Even on Boxing Day, it was buzzing with energy, though not as packed as usual. Eric secured us spots at the bar and ordered champagne before I could object. "To Jessica Chen," he said, raising his glass once the bubbling flutes were placed before us. "The most brilliant, stubborn, and deserving CEO I know." I clinked my glass against his, a smile tugging at my lips despite my nervousness. That's a very small sample size. Doesn't make it any less true. We were halfway through our drinks when a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise. "Jessica? Jessica Chen?" I turned to find Michael Lawson, a former classmate from UW who now worked as a senior developer at Amazon. His surprised expression as he approached suggested he'd heard something. "Michael, hi. This is Eric Rodriguez, my best friend and biggest fan," Eric supplied, extending his hand. Michael shook it absently, his attention still fixed on me. "Word's going around that you've been tapped for Meridian's new accessibility division. Is it true?" News traveled fast in Seattle's tech community, especially when it involved a major player like Meridian. "Yes, it's official as of this morning." "That's incredible." His surprise seemed genuine, but there was something else in his expression. Reassessment, perhaps, or the particular recalculation that happens when someone you've underestimated suddenly proves their worth. "Last I heard, you were working on some startup thing out of a co-working space. Adaptive Interface Solutions. Meridian acquired it." The words felt strange in my mouth, formal and weightier than I was used to. "Smart move on their part. Your adaptive algorithms were always cutting edge, even back in grad school." He paused, then added, "Your brother still at Chen Global? I saw him at a conference last month. Mentioned I knew you from UW." He seemed surprised. The reference to Tyler brought a familiar tightness to my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. "Yes, he's still there, on the partnership track, apparently." Michael nodded, though something in his expression suggested he'd picked up on the tension. "Well, congrats again. Meridian's lucky to have you." He glanced at his watch. "I should get back to my team. We're celebrating a major AWS integration going live yesterday. But we should catch up sometime." "Definitely," I agreed, though we both knew it was unlikely. Our paths had diverged years ago, connected now only by the thin thread of Seattle's tech community gossip. After he left, Eric raised an eyebrow. "That was interesting. Think he'll tell Tyler he ran into you?" "Probably. They're both in that Amazon developer poker group." I took another sip of champagne, the bubbles stinging my tongue. "Doesn't matter. Everyone's going to know soon anyway." "True. But are you ready for that? For being visible in a way you haven't been before?" I considered the question seriously. All my life, I'd worked in relative obscurity, first in Tyler's shadow, then deliberately keeping a low profile as I built my company away from my family's scrutiny. The position at Meridian would thrust me into a spotlight I'd never sought. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm not turning down the opportunity because I'm afraid of being seen." Eric's expression softened. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be amazing. You've always done your best work when you're proving something." "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "Both. Neither, just an observation." He signaled the bartender for another round. "The chip on your shoulder has served you well as motivation. Just don't let it define you now that you've got what you wanted." His words stuck with me through the rest of the evening and into the next day, as I prepared for my orientation at Meridian. I chose my outfit carefully, a charcoal pantsuit with a deep blue blouse, professional but not trying too hard. My grandmother's Bulova watch on my wrist, a small talisman of the one family member who had always believed in me. Eric drove me to Meridian's headquarters, an impressive glass and steel structure overlooking Elliott Bay. The morning was clear and cold, the kind of winter day that made Seattle feel like it was carved from crystal. "Text me how it goes," he said as I gathered my bag. "I'm only a few blocks away if you need an extraction." I laughed, the sound more nervous than I intended. "I'll be fine. It's just orientation. HR paperwork, system access, that kind of thing. And possibly a confrontation with your mother who may or may not know you're coming." "There's that." I took a deep breath. "But I'm done hiding, Eric. Whatever happens, happens." The Meridian lobby was a study in modern minimalism, soaring ceilings, clean lines, and a massive sculptural installation that seemed to change shape depending on where you stood. The receptionist directed me to the executive floor where Harold's assistant would meet me. My heart pounded as the elevator ascended to the 32nd floor. I had no idea if my mother would be there, if Harold had informed her of my arrival, or how she might react if we came face to face. The doors opened onto a reception area with sweeping views of the sound, staffed by a young man with carefully styled hair and an earpiece. "Ms. Chen, I'm Jake, Mr. Williamson's administrative coordinator. He asked me to get you settled in while he wraps up his morning meetings." He gestured for me to follow him down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices. "Margaret is out today. She usually handles executive onboarding, but she called in this morning." The knot in my stomach loosened slightly. So my mother knew I was coming and had chosen to avoid the confrontation. It was both a relief and a postponement of the inevitable. Jake led me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a privacy view that encompassed both the bay and the city skyline. A sleek desk, ergonomic chair, and small conference table occupied the space, along with a credenza bearing a high-end coffee machine and a basket of snacks. "This will be your office," he explained. "The accessibility team is currently spread across several departments, but they'll be consolidated on this floor over the next few weeks. HR has prepared your onboarding packet." He indicated a folder on the desk. "And IT will be up shortly to set up your access credentials and equipment preferences." I set my bag down, trying to absorb the reality that this space was now mine. After years of working from coffee shops and shared desks in co-working spaces, I had an office with a door and a view and an administrative coordinator who called me Ms. Chen. "Thank you, Jake. This is overwhelming," he supplied with a knowing smile. "Everyone feels that way at first. It'll become normal faster than you think." He handed me a security badge with my name and photo. They must have pulled it from my LinkedIn profile. "This gives you access to the executive floor and the innovation lab on 17. I will program the rest of your permissions this afternoon." After Jake left, I took a moment to simply stand at the window, watching ferries cross the Sound against the backdrop of snow-capped Olympic mountains. From this height, Seattle looked like a model city, perfect and pristine, the problems and complexities reduced to miniature scale. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. "Settled in? Mother Dragon slayed yet?" I smiled, typing back, "Office." With a view, no sign of the dragon, she called in, "Sick." His response was immediate. "Interesting timing. Be ready when she does show up." A knock at the door interrupted my reply. A young woman from IT arrived with a laptop and tablet, followed by an HR representative with forms requiring signatures. The morning passed in a blur of paperwork, system configurations, and introductory meetings with key team members who would report to me once the division was officially launched. By lunchtime, I had a preliminary organizational chart, a project, timeline extending through the March launch, and the beginnings of a headache from information overload. I was reviewing budget projections when another knock came at my door. Harold Williamson entered without waiting for a response, bringing with him an air of contained energy that seemed to transform the space. "Jessica, how are you settling in?" I stood, smoothing my jacket automatically. "Very well, thank you. Everyone's been incredibly helpful." "Good to hear." He glanced at the papers spread across my desk. "I see accounting's already buried you in numbers. Don't let them intimidate you. Challenge anything that doesn't make sense." "I will." I hesitated, then decided directness was best. "I understand my mother called in sick today." Harold's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. a confirmation of what we both knew was really happening. Yes, rather suddenly this morning. First time in years, actually. I see. Margaret is an excellent executive assistant, he said carefully. Very dedicated, very protective of Meridian's interests. And mine. I'm aware. However, he continued, her personal feelings about your new role here are irrelevant to the company's operations, and my expectations of professional conduct from all employees. He paused, ensuring his meaning was clear. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jessica? I nodded, appreciating his directness. Completely. Whatever personal history exists won't affect my work or my interactions with any Meridian employee. Good. He checked his watch. I have a lunch with the board in 10 minutes, but I wanted to personally welcome you and make sure you had everything you needed. I do. Thank you again for this opportunity. You earned it. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. The executive team dinner is this Friday at Canlease. Partners are welcome. A chance to meet everyone in a less formal setting before the real work begins in January. My stomach tightened at the thought of seeing my mother across a dinner table, this time in a professional context where she couldn't simply tell me to leave. I'll be there. Excellent. Harold nodded once, decisive as always, and departed. I sank back into my chair, the reality of the situation settling over me like a weighted blanket. My mother had called in sick to avoid seeing me on my first day, a woman who had once come to work with pneumonia rather than admit weakness. The confrontation had been postponed, but it was coming. And when it did, it would be public, witnessed, by the entire executive team. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Eric. Dragon sighting delayed, but the final battle has been scheduled for Friday night at Canlease. Formal attire. Wanna be my +1? His reply made me smile despite my nerves. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll bring a fire extinguisher. I turned back to the budget projections, determination settling into my bones. I had earned this position. I had built something valuable, enough that Harold Williamson himself had sought me out. No matter what happened with my mother, that truth couldn't be taken away from me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't an afterthought or a disappointment or the difficult daughter who wouldn't conform. I was a CEO, with an office and a team and a vision that people believed in. Whatever storm was coming, I would weather it. Because this time, I wasn't standing alone on a snowy porch, waiting for someone to let me back in. This time, I had built my own house. Canlease restaurant perched on the hillside like a modernist eagle's nest, its glass walls offering panoramic views of Lake Union and the city lights below. I adjusted my navy blue dress, a last-minute purchase that had cost more than I wanted to think about, and took a steadying breath as Eric parked his car in the valet line. Ready for this? He asked, his usual casual demeanor replaced by an unexpected formality in a charcoal suit and blue tie that complemented my dress. A deliberate choice, his silent way of showing we were a united front. As I'll ever be. I smoothed a non-existent wrinkle from my skirt. Thanks for being my +1. I know formal corporate dinners aren't exactly your scene. Are you kidding? I've been waiting years to see you claim your rightful place at the table. He squeezed my hand briefly. Besides, I wouldn't miss the look on your mother's face for anything. The maitre d' led us through the restaurant's warm, wood-paneled interior to a private dining room where the Meridian executive team was gathering. Crystal glasses caught the light from sculptural chandeliers, white tablecloths pristine against dark wood chairs. Through the windows, Seattle twinkled below, ferries crossing the water like slow-moving fireflies. Harold Williamson spotted us, immediately, excusing himself from a conversation to approach us. Jessica, glad you could make it. He shook my hand, then Eric's. And you must be Eric Rodriguez. I've heard a lot about your contributions to the adaptive interface algorithm. Eric looked surprised at being recognized. That's generous of Jessica to mention. The brilliant parts are all hers. I just helped debug some early prototypes. Don't believe him, I said. He was instrumental in the accessibility features. We wouldn't have gotten funding without his input on the user experience. Harold nodded approvingly. That's the kind of loyal partnership Meridian values. Come, let me introduce you to the team. As we moved through the room, I scanned for my mother, tension coiling in my stomach. I spotted her near the bar, engaged, in conversation with Diane Mercer, Meridian's CFO. Even from across the room, I could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the too bright smile that never reached her eyes. She was wearing her armor tonight, a perfectly tailored black dress, pearls at her throat, hair swept into an immaculate updo. Harold guided us through a series of introductions: the CTO, the head of product development, the global marketing director. Each greeted me with varying degrees of curiosity and warmth. I was the newcomer, the unknown quantity, the surprising choice Harold had made without the usual rounds of executive vetting. And of course, you know Margaret Chen, my executive assistant, Harold said finally, steering us toward my mother. She turned slowly, her expression perfectly composed except for the slight tightening around her eyes. Jessica, how lovely to see you. The formality in her voice was for Harold's benefit, a performance of professionalism that anyone who didn't know our history might find convincing. I matched her tone precisely. Hello, Mother. I believe you know Eric Rodriguez? Her gaze flicked to Eric, a flash of disapproval quickly masked. Of course, from the university. Eric smiled with deliberate warmth. Mrs. Chen, it's been a while. Congratulations on your daughter's new position. You must be very proud. The subtle emphasis on must wasn't lost on anyone. My mother's smile tightened further. Quite a surprise to us all. Jessica has always been unconventional in her career choices. The best leaders often are, Harold interjected smoothly. Innovation requires thinking outside established patterns. That's precisely why Jessica is perfect to head our accessibility initiative. My mother nodded. The perfect corporate soldier. Of course. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the seating arrangements. She retreated with practiced grace, leaving a wake of tension Harold pretended not to notice. Dinner should be starting shortly. Jessica, you'll be seated near me so we can discuss the department transition. As he moved away to greet late arrivals, Eric leaned close to my ear. Round one to the new CEO. Your mother looks like she swallowed a lemon. This isn't a victory lap, Eric, I murmured, accepting a glass of wine from a passing server. We'll be working together indefinitely. Every day doesn't need to be a battle, says the woman whose hands are shaking, he observed quietly. I glanced down, surprised to see he was right. The wine in my glass trembled slightly, despite my best efforts to appear calm. It's just adrenaline. It's 28 years of conditioning, telling you that you're in forbidden territory. He nodded toward where my mother was now rearranging place cards with surgical precision. She trained you to believe you didn't belong at tables like this. Your body's still catching up to what? Your brain knows that she was wrong. Before I could respond, a gentle chime indicated dinner was ready to be served. We found our places. Eric and I separated, a strategic move by my mother, no doubt. I was seated between Harold and the CTO, while Eric was placed next to the head of marketing across the table. My mother had positioned herself at the far end, as far from me as the arrangement allowed while still maintaining her usual proximity to Harold's wife, Elaine. The first course arrived, an artful arrangement of local seafood that probably cost more than I used to make in a day at my old coding job. The conversation flowed around me, tech industry gossip mixed with discussions of market trends and Meridian's position for the coming year. Jessica, tell us more about how you developed the adaptive interface, Diane Mercer said during a lull, genuine interest in her voice. Harold says it's revolutionary for accessibility applications. All eyes turned to me, including my mother's carefully neutral gaze from the end of the table. This was the moment, my first chance to establish myself as a peer in this room full of executives who had decades more experience than I did. It started with a simple observation, I began, setting down my fork. Most accessibility tech tries to create a one-size-fits-all solution, but that fundamentally misunderstands the nature of disability and different user needs. What works perfectly for someone with limited vision might be useless for someone with motor control issues. The CTO nodded encouragingly. So instead of a fixed interface, we created one that learns and adapts in real time. The algorithm observes user behavior patterns and adjusts incrementally, becoming more personalized with each interaction. No manual configuration required. The potential applications extend far beyond traditional accessibility markets, Harold added. Healthcare, education, even industrial controls could benefit from interfaces that adapt to user behavior patterns. That's exactly right, I said, warming to the topic. We've designed the core architecture to be modular so it can be deployed across multiple platforms and use cases. Ambitious, commented the head of product development, a slight skepticism in his tone. What's your timeline for full implementation? We're looking at a phased rollout starting in March, I replied, careful not to overpromise. Core functionality first, then expanding features based on user feedback and performance metrics. Jessica has always had grand ideas, my mother interjected, her voice carrying from the end of the table. Even as a child, she dreamed big, though bringing those dreams to fruition, well, that was sometimes a challenge. The subtle undermining was so skillfully done that most people around the table wouldn't recognize it for what it was. But I saw Eric's jaw tighten across the table, saw Harold's almost imperceptible frown. Actually, I said evenly, bringing this particular dream to fruition is precisely why we're all here tonight. The algorithm works. The prototype has been validated by independent testing, and the market potential is significant enough that Harold created an entirely new division around it. A brief silence fell over the table. My mother's expression didn't change, but a flush crept up her neck, the only visible sign that my direct response had landed. Which brings me to an announcement, Harold said, seizing the moment. As you all know, Meridian will be showcasing our new accessibility initiative at the Global Tech Conference in March. I'm pleased to share that Jessica will be delivering the keynote presentation, introducing both the technology and our company's renewed commitment to adaptive computing. Murmurs of approval circled the table, along with a few raised eyebrows. The GTC was one of the industry's premier events, covered by every major tech publication. Having a new, untested executive deliver the keynote was a bold move, even by Harold standards. That's quite an opportunity, Diane said, lifting her glass slightly in my direction. The spotlight will certainly be on Meridian that week. And on Jessica, my mother added, her smile not reaching her eyes. Such pressure. For someone so new to the corporate environment. Are you sure you're ready for that level of scrutiny, dear? The endearment landed like a slap. Before I could respond, Eric spoke up from across the table. Jessica's been presenting her research at international conferences since graduate school, he said casually, including the distinguished paper. Award at the International Symposium on Accessible Computing last year. I'd say the GTC keynote is right in her wheelhouse. My mother's gaze flickered to him, cool and dismissive. How fortunate that she has such a supportive friend. The emphasis on friend carried an insinuation that made my cheeks warm. Eric just smiled, unbothered. Fortune has nothing to do with it. Merit does. Harold cleared his throat slightly, a subtle signal that the conversation was veering off course. The decision is made. Jessica will deliver the keynote, with support from our marketing and product teams to ensure Meridian puts its best foot forward. Dinner progressed through several more exquisite courses, the conversation shifting to safer territories, the Seattle real estate market, the latest exhibit at the art museum, predictions for next year's America's Cup. I participated when appropriate, but kept my guard up, aware of my mother's watchful gaze from the end of the table. As dessert was being served, I excused myself to find the restroom, needing a moment, alone, to recalibrate. The hallway outside the private dining room was quiet, the sounds of the main restaurant muffled by thick carpet and wood paneling. I had just located the restroom when a familiar voice stopped me. Jessica. I turned to find my mother standing a few feet away, her expression unreadable in the dimly lit corridor. We were alone for the first time since Christmas Eve. Mother. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Dinner is lovely. Thank you for arranging it. This needs to stop, she said without preamble. This performance you're putting on. You've made your point. I blinked, genuinely confused. What performance? What point? This. She gestured vaguely toward the dining room. Taking a position at Harold's company. Inserting yourself into my professional life. It's vindictive and childish. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. When I finally found my voice, it came out softer than I intended. You think I accepted a C-level position at one of Seattle's top tech companies? To spite you? Why else would you do it? You've never shown interest in corporate leadership before. You've always insisted on your little independent projects, your startups, your freelance work. She adjusted her pearl necklace, a nervous habit I hadn't seen since childhood. Now suddenly you want to be an executive at the exact company where I've built my career for 15 years? The sheer narcissism of her perspective was breathtaking. Mother, Harold approached me. He sought out my technology, my company. This has nothing to do with you. Of course it does. He would never have noticed your work if not for your connection to me. There it was again. The same dismissal, the same refusal to acknowledge that I might have earned something on my own merit. It was so familiar it almost felt comfortable, like an old sweater I'd outgrown but kept wearing out of habit. Is it really so impossible for you to believe that someone might value my work on its own terms? I asked quietly. That I might be good enough without your name, or your connections, or your approval? Something flickered across her face, hurt, perhaps, or frustration, but it was quickly masked by the cool efficiency that was her baseline. You've always had an inflated sense of your own exceptionalism, Jessica. It's why you struggle to work within established systems, why you clash with authority figures. First in school, then with your professors, now with your family. I don't clash with authority figures, I said, an edge creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. I clash with people who take credit for others' work, people who value conformity over truth, people who mistake cruelty for strength. Her back stiffened. If you're referring to the ridiculous accusations against your brother, they're not accusations, they're facts, with evidence, which I offered to show you and you refused to see. Because I know my son. I know he wouldn't do what you claim. The simple, unwavering conviction in her voice cut deeper than her anger ever could. She believed in Tyler completely, instinctively, without question. She had never once extended me the same benefit of the doubt. Do you know what the hardest part is? I said, surprised by the sudden burn of tears behind my eyes. It's not that you believe him over me. It's that you never even considered the possibility that I might be telling the truth. You never asked to see the evidence. You never questioned his story. You just decided I must be lying, must be jealous, must be wrong, because that's who I am in your narrative. The difficult daughter who makes things up for attention. Jessica. No, I interrupted, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. I'm done trying to convince you of what you refuse to see. I took this job because it's an incredible opportunity to build something meaningful, to create technology that will genuinely help people. The fact that it happens to be at Meridian is coincidence, not conspiracy. She studied me for a long moment, as if seeing someone she didn't quite recognize. And what happens when this falls apart? When you realize corporate leadership requires diplomacy and compromise, not just clever coding? What happens when Harold realizes you're not ready for this level of responsibility? The questions were designed to plant seeds of doubt, to make me question my own capabilities. They might have worked a week ago. But something had shifted inside me since Christmas Eve. A fundamental realignment of my relationship with her judgment. "Then I'll handle it," I said simply. "Like an adult, like a professional, like the CEO I am." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This won't end well, Jessica. For either of us. It doesn't have to be adversarial. We can maintain professional boundaries. Plenty of family members work for the same companies without drama. Is that what you think this is? Just workplace politics?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "You've positioned yourself as my superior in the company where I've dedicated my entire career, where I've built relationships and trust and reputation. And you expect me to simply accept that?" The raw honesty of her response caught me off guard. For perhaps the first time, she was admitting the true source of her anger, not concern for me or for Meridian, but for her own position and status. "I'm not your superior, Mother. We have different roles in different departments. The organizational chart doesn't even connect us directly." "Don't be naive. You'll be sitting in executive meetings where decisions about staffing and resources are made. You'll have Harold's ear in ways I never will, despite 15 years of loyal service. And you think I'd use that to undermine you somehow? To what end?" She didn't answer directly, but her expression said everything. Of course I would use it against her. In her mind, that's exactly what I was already doing. "We should return to dinner," she said finally, her professional mask sliding back into place. "People will wonder where we've gone." As she turned to leave, I caught her arm gently. "Mother, this doesn't have to be a war. We can both succeed at Meridian." She looked down at my hand on her sleeve, then back to my face. "You made your choice at Christmas, Jessica. You chose your pride over your family. Now we both have to live with the consequences of that decision." She pulled away and walked back toward the dining room, shoulders straight, head high, every inch the consummate executive assistant who never showed weakness or doubt. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment longer, drawing in a deep breath before following. The conversation had confirmed what I already suspected. There would be no easy reconciliation, no professional detente. My mother saw my presence at Meridian as a direct threat, not just to her position, but to her identity. When I returned to the table, conversation was flowing again. The atmosphere relaxed as people finished their desserts and coffee. Eric caught my eye with a questioning look. I gave a slight shake of my head. Not now. "Jessica," Harold said as I took my seat, "we were just discussing the timeline for the team consolidation. I think we should accelerate bringing everyone under your direct management by mid-January, rather than waiting until February." I focused on the question, grateful for the return to business matters. "I agree. The sooner we have everyone aligned, organizationally, the faster we can move on implementation." "Excellent. Let's plan on announcing the formal structure next week then." He turned to include the broader table. "I want everyone to understand that the Accessibility Initiative isn't a side project or a corporate social responsibility checkmark. It's a core business strategy that will define Meridian's approach to user experience across all our products." The conviction in his voice silenced any lingering doubts around the table. Whatever reservations the other executives might have had about my appointment, Harold's clear support carried significant weight. As the dinner wound down, people began saying their goodbyes, exchanging business cards and making plans for follow-up meetings. My mother was among the first to leave, citing an early morning commitment. She bid a polite farewell to the group at large, nodding briefly in my direction without making eye contact. Eric and I were among the last to depart, having engaged in a lengthy discussion with the CTO about integration challenges for the adaptive interface. As we waited for the valet to bring his car, he finally asked the question he'd been holding all evening. "What happened in the hallway with your mother?" I wrapped my coat tighter against the January chill. She thinks I took the job to spite her, to undermine her position at Meridian. He let out a low whistle. That's quite the narcissistic take. It's how she sees the world. Everything is ultimately about her, her status, her reputation, her control. I watched my breath form clouds in the cold air. The irony is, I barely thought about how this would affect her when I accepted the position. I was focused on the opportunity, the technology, the platform Meridian could provide. And now? I considered the question as the valet pulled up with Eric's car. Now I understand that we can't separate the personal and professional as neatly as I hoped. She sees my presence at Meridian as a declaration of war, and she'll act accordingly. Eric opened the passenger door for me, his expression concerned. What does that mean for you? It means I need to be prepared. I settled into the seat, suddenly exhausted by the evening's emotional undercurrents. She knows the company better than I do. She has relationships I don't. And she's had 15 years to build alliances and influence. But you have Harold's support and the technology everyone's excited about. For now. I stared out at the Seattle skyline as we pulled away from the restaurant. But corporate dynamics can shift quickly. I need to prove myself immediately, show results faster than expected, build my own relationships within the company. Eric was quiet for a moment, as he navigated the winding road down from Canlis. You know, most people would be celebrating after a night like tonight. Dinner at one of the best restaurants in Seattle, praise from the CEO, excitement about your technology. Instead, you're strategizing how to outmaneuver your mother in corporate politics. The observation stung because it was accurate. Is that pathetic? No. It's sad. He glanced over, his expression softening. Sad that she's turned what should be a professional triumph into another battlefield. Sad that you've had to develop these defensive instincts in the first place. I leaned back against the headrest, letting the truth of his words sink in. It was sad. All of it. The broken relationship with my mother that might never heal. The reflexive need to protect myself from her judgment and manipulation. The way her disapproval still had the power to dim my accomplishments, even as I achieved more than she'd ever believed possible. I just wanted her to be proud, I admitted quietly. Not even tonight. I gave up on that years ago. But when I was younger, when I was first discovering my love for coding, for solving problems no one else could solve, I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at Tyler when he brought home trophies. Eric reached over to squeeze my hand briefly before returning it to the steering wheel. I know. It's stupid. I'm a 28-year-old CEO and I'm still craving my mother's approval like a child. It's not stupid, it's human. He turned onto the highway toward Capitol Hill, where I was still staying in his guest room until my apartment was ready. But, Jessica, at some point, you have to accept that her approval isn't coming. Not because you don't deserve it, but because she isn't capable of giving it. The truth of his words settled over me as we drove through the quiet, rain-slicked streets. Maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't about earning her approval anymore, but about accepting that some voids couldn't be filled, some relationships couldn't be fixed. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Harold, already following up on action items from dinner. The subject line read simply, GTC Keynote, First Planning Meeting Monday. Reality reasserted itself. Whatever personal turmoil swirled beneath, the surface, I had a job to do, a division to build, a keynote to prepare. The adaptive interface technology deserved my full attention and energy. I couldn't let family drama derail what I'd worked so hard to create. By the time we reached Eric's apartment building, I had mentally shifted gears, reviewing the upcoming week's meetings and priorities. As we rode the elevator up to his floor, he studied my face. There she is, he said with a slight smile. CEO, Chen, back in the building. What do you mean? Your expression changed on the drive. You went from looking wounded to looking determined. He unlocked his apartment door, holding it open for me. It's the same look you get when you're solving a particularly nasty coding problem. Like you've forgotten everything except the challenge directly in front of you. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? He considered the question as he hung up his coat. Both, probably. Good because it's how you've accomplished everything in your life, by focusing with laser intensity on the work itself. Bad because sometimes you use it to avoid dealing with the emotional stuff. The emotional stuff doesn't get me anywhere, I said, kicking off my heels with relief. It just keeps me stuck in the same patterns, the same arguments, the same dead ends. Maybe. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of water. Or maybe it's the work that keeps you stuck, because it gives you something to hide behind when the feelings get too intense. I accepted the water, irritated by his insight. When did you become a therapist? I've been watching you navigate your family dynamics for a decade, Jess. I've picked up a few patterns. He loosened his tie, transforming back into the casual Eric I knew better. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. You've got a company to run, a keynote to prepare, and an apartment to furnish before you drive me crazy with your color-coded storage system taking over my living room. The sudden shift back to practicalities made me laugh despite myself. My storage system is efficient, not crazy. You labeled the bathroom drawer with exact counts of cotton swabs. That's not efficient. That's borderline pathological. The easy banter carried us through the rest of the evening as we shed the formality of the dinner and returned to our usual dynamic. But as I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling of Eric's guest room, my mother's words echoed in my mind. You made your choice at Christmas, Jessica. You chose your pride over your family. Was that really what had happened? Had I chosen pride over family? Or had I finally chosen truth over comfortable lies? Self-respect over appeasement? Growth over stagnation? Either way, there was no going back now. I had stepped into a new role, a new identity, a new chapter of my life where I wasn't defined by my family's expectations or limitations. Whatever challenges awaited at Meridian, including the ongoing tension with my mother, I would face them as CEO Jessica Chen, not as Margaret's difficult daughter. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. My phone buzzed with a late-night text from an unknown number. I reached for it reluctantly, half expecting another message from Tyler or Amanda. Instead, I found a brief note from Harold Williamson. Impressive navigation of difficult waters tonight. Looking forward to seeing what you build at Meridian. The team is already rallying behind your vision. A simple acknowledgement of what he had clearly observed, the tension with my mother, the underlying currents at dinner, and an equally clear statement of his confidence in me despite those complications. I set the phone down without replying. Tomorrow would be time enough for professional communication. Tonight, I needed rest before the real work began. Building a division, establishing my leadership, preparing for the GTC keynote that would introduce Meridian's accessibility initiative to the world. And somewhere in the midst of all that, finding a way to coexist professionally with the woman who had disowned me on Christmas Eve and now viewed my success as a direct threat to her own. No pressure. The weeks leading up to the Global Tech Conference flew by in a blur of preparation, team building, and late nights at Meridian's headquarters. I had moved into my own apartment in Queen Anne, a modern one-bedroom with views of the Space Needle that still felt strange and impermanent, like a hotel room I was visiting rather than a home. My mother and I had established a cold professional détente, interacting only when absolutely necessary in executive meetings, our exchanges brief and rigidly polite. The rest of the leadership team had picked up on the tension, but followed Harold's lead in pretending not to notice. Office gossip inevitably circulated. I'd heard whispers about family drama and nepotism concerns, but I kept my head down and focused on results rather than rumor management. The adaptive interface integration was proceeding ahead of schedule. My team had grown to 15 engineers and designers, all rallying behind the vision with an enthusiasm that surprised even Harold. The early user testing was yielding exceptional results, with accessibility advocates praising the prototype as revolutionary and the first technology that truly adapts to me, not the other way around. I should have been celebrating these victories. But as the GTC keynote approached, a nagging anxiety grew in the pit of my stomach. Not about the presentation itself, I'd spoken at conferences before, but about what it represented. This wasn't just a technical demonstration, it was my public debut as a Meridian executive, the moment when my leadership would be evaluated by the entire tech industry, and my family would be watching. The morning of the conference dawned clear and crisp, the Seattle spring bringing cherry blossoms and the scent of possibility on the air. I stood in my hotel room in San Francisco, adjusting the blazer of my carefully selected outfit, a tailored midnight blue suit with subtle geometric patterning that Eric had insisted screams confident tech executive without trying too hard. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Knock 'em dead, CEO. I'm in the front row, ready to cheer inappropriately loud." I smiled, grateful he'd flown down for moral support. Having a friendly face in the audience would help anchor me through the nerves. Another message appeared, from Harold. "Team is assembled in the green room whenever you're ready. Take your time." I took one last look in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. Gone was the uncertain engineer who had stood on her parents' porch in the snow at Christmas. In her place stood someone with clear eyes and squared shoulders, someone who looked like she belonged at the helm of a cutting-edge technology division. "You've got this," I told my reflection, then grabbed my keynote notes and headed for the elevator. The convention center was already buzzing with activity. Tech enthusiasts, industry professionals, and media representatives streaming through the massive entry hall adorned with banners from major companies. The Meridian logo featured prominently on the main stage backdrop, where I would be speaking in less than an hour. Security directed me to the green room, where I found Harold, the marketing team, and several members of my engineering department, reviewing last-minute details. They looked up as I entered, and Harold stepped forward. "Jessica, everything is set." He handed me a small box. "A tradition. I give each executive a token before their first major public address representing Meridian." Inside was a sleek silver pen, engraved with my name and the Meridian logo. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "This means a lot." "You've earned it. The work you've done in the past 3 months has exceeded every expectation." He glanced at his watch. 20 minutes until you're on. The house is packed. We had to add an overflow room for the live stream." My stomach tightened. "No pressure." He smiled, understanding in his eyes. "Just remember, you know this technology better than anyone in that room. You built it. Trust that knowledge." A production assistant appeared to fit me with a microphone, and the marketing director ran through final reminders about key messaging points. Amid the controlled chaos, I almost didn't notice the figure hovering near the door until Harold called out. "Margaret, is everything all right?" My mother stood in the doorway, perfectly put together in a gray suit, her expression unreadable. "Sorry to interrupt. The Westlake Ventures representatives have arrived. They're asking about seating arrangements." "Handle it as you see fit," Harold replied. "I'm sure you'll make sure they're well taken care of." She nodded and turned to leave, but not before her eyes met mine. A fleeting, complex look I couldn't decipher. "Wait," I heard myself say. "Mother, a moment?" Surprise flickered across her face, but she nodded, stepping aside as I joined her in the hallway outside the green room. The bustle of the convention center created a bubble of white noise around us. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "The keynote starts soon." "No, nothing's wrong." I took a deep breath. I wanted to say thank you. Her eyebrows rose. For what? For the preparation you gave me, even if you didn't mean to. All those years of pushing me to be perfect, to anticipate problems, to stay 3 steps ahead, they're serving me well now. I gestured toward the stage area. I'm about to present to 3,000 people and I'm not falling apart. That composure came from somewhere. She studied me, confusion mingling with something else in her expression. I don't understand. Is this some kind of reconciliation attempt? No, I said honestly. I don't think we're there yet. Maybe we never will be. But I needed to acknowledge that not everything you instilled in me was harmful. Some of it made me stronger. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I caught a glimpse of the woman behind the perfect executive assistant. Uncertain, perhaps even vulnerable. You were always strong, Jessica, she said quietly. Too strong sometimes, too unwilling to bend. I know you see it as stubbornness, but it's the same quality that helped me build something valuable enough that Harold created, an entire division around it. I straightened my blazer. The same quality that's going to help me nail this keynote. A hint of a smile touched her lips, so quickly I might have imagined it. You don't need my help with that. No, I agreed. I don't. But I wanted you to know. I see the whole picture now, the good and the bad. And I'm not angry anymore. Just clear-eyed. The 5-minute warning call interrupted whatever she might have said in response. I need to get back, I said, gesturing toward the green room. She nodded, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. Of course. She hesitated, then added, Good luck, Jessica. I know you'll represent Meridian well. It wasn't exactly maternal warmth, but it was something, an acknowledgement, a small extension of professional respect. I would take it. As I turned to leave, she spoke again. Your father will be watching the live stream. Tyler and Amanda, too. I froze, surprised. They will? Yes, I sent them the link. She straightened an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. Whatever our disagreements, you're still their daughter, their sister. This is an important moment in your career. The information settled like a stone in my stomach. Not unpleasant, just heavy with implications. My family would be watching, seeing me in this new role, this new identity I'd built without them. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. She nodded once, then turned and walked away, duty calling her back to the Westlake Ventures representatives, back to the role she had perfected over 15 years at Meridian. I returned to the green room, my mind racing with this new knowledge. My family would be watching. Somehow this made the stakes feel both higher and less important. Higher because they would witness either my triumph or my failure. Less important because I no longer needed their approval to validate my worth. Harold looked up as I entered. Everything okay? Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. Everything is fine. The next few minutes passed in a blur of final preparations. Before I knew it, I was standing in the wings of the massive stage, listening to Harold introduce me to the audience. A visionary and adaptive interface technology whose work will transform how we think about accessibility in computing. Please welcome the CEO of Meridian's Accessibility Division, Jessica Chen. Applause thundered through the convention hall. As I walked onto the stage, lights bright in my eyes, the massive Meridian logo gleaming on screens behind me. I spotted Eric in the front row as promised, giving me a subtle thumbs up. Beside him sat the Westlake Ventures team, and scattered throughout the audience were faces I recognized from Meridian, colleagues, team members, supporters. I took my position at the center of the stage, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This moment, this platform, this opportunity, I had earned it all. Not through family connections or nepotism, but through years of work, through persistence when no one believed in my vision, through the courage to start over when my family had closed their door on me. Thank you, Harold, I began, my voice steady and clear through the sound system. 3 months ago, I found myself at a crossroads, personally and professionally. Sometimes the moments that feel like endings are actually beginnings in disguise. I launched into the presentation, guiding the audience through the evolution of the adaptive interface technology, from concept to prototype to Meridian's full-scale implementation. The demonstrations drew gasps and applause, especially when a visually impaired user joined me on stage to showcase how the interface had transformed their ability to navigate complex digital environments. As I reached the conclusion, I found myself adding something that hadn't been in my prepared remarks. Technology at its best doesn't try to make humans conform to its limitations. It adapts to our unique needs, capabilities, and circumstances. The same principle applies to our lives and relationships. We can spend years trying to fit ourselves into rigid systems that weren't designed for us. Or we can build something new that honors who we truly are. I glanced toward the back of the hall, where my mother stood watching, her expression thoughtful. At Meridian, we're committed to building technology that meets people where they are, in all their diversity, complexity, and humanity. Because everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and included on their own terms. The applause was immediate and overwhelming, the audience rising to their feet in a standing ovation that washed over me like a wave. Harold joined me on stage, shaking, my hand as cameras flashed and recorded the moment for industry publications and social media. "Exceptional," he murmured, pride evident in his voice. "You've just changed the conversation about accessibility tech for the entire industry." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of media interviews, investor meetings, and congratulations from colleagues and competitors alike. By evening, the video of my keynote had gone viral in tech circles, with industry influencers calling it a defining moment for adaptive technology. I finally escaped to the hotel bar, where Eric waited with a much-needed glass of champagne and his characteristic grin. "So, CEO Chen, how does it feel to be the talk of the tech world?" I sank into the chair across from him, exhaustion and exhilaration battling for dominance. "Surreal, overwhelming, exactly right. I spotted your mother in the back of the hall. She didn't look like someone whose world was ending." "No," I agreed, thinking of our brief exchange before the keynote. "She looked like someone witnessing something she never expected." "Has she said anything since?" "No, but she told me my father and siblings were watching the live stream." I turned the champagne glass slowly in my hands. "Weird, right? After everything that happened?" Eric shrugged. "Not really. You're family, even when you're at odds, and success like yours is hard to ignore." My phone buzzed with a text notification. I pulled it out, expecting another congratulatory message from a Meridian colleague. Instead, I found a message from my father. "Proud of you today, Jessica. You were extraordinary." A simple acknowledgement, but one I never thought I'd receive, again after the Christmas confrontation. It didn't erase the hurt or resolve the deeper issues between us, but it was something. A small crack in the wall that had seemed impenetrable 3 months ago. "Good news?" Eric asked, noting my expression. "Just an unexpected message." I put the phone away, unwilling to analyze it further tonight. This moment was about celebrating what I had built, not rehashing family dynamics. "Tell me honestly, how was the keynote from an audience perspective?" "You owned that stage like you were born for it," he said without hesitation. "Remember that nervous coder who once made me check her conference slides 17 times? She's evolved into someone who can command a room of 3,000 industry experts without breaking a sweat." I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. "I still made you check my slides 17 times. "True. Some things never change." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings disguised as endings." I clinked my glass against his, the phrase from my keynote coming full circle. "To building something too valuable to ignore." Whatever happened with my family, whether we eventually found a new equilibrium or maintained our distance, I had proven something essential to myself. I could lose everything familiar and still build something meaningful from the pieces. I could be rejected by the people who should have valued me most and still find my worth reflected in the eyes of those who recognized my true potential. The door my mother had closed on Christmas night hadn't been an ending after all. It had been the first step onto a path that was entirely my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out.